Before dawn, Chicago was still half asleep under a blanket of cold fog. But deep inside a federal command center near Midway Airport, the air was alive with tension. Screens glowed red, maps stretched across walls, and radio chatter filled the silence like a pulse. What was about to unfold would become one of the largest coordinated federal raids in modern U.S. history. An operation that would expose a hidden cartel empire embedded inside American soil. The mission's name was simple, but its impact would echo far beyond Chicago Operation Midway Blitz. At exactly 5:30 a.m., convoys of unmarked vehicles rolled through Little Village, Cicero, and Joliet. The city was still quiet. Trucks idled at traffic lights. Steam rose from sewer grates, and the hum of early freight trains echoed in the distance. But behind that ordinary morning, hundreds of agents were already in motion. ICE tactical teams, DEA special operations units, FBI hostage rescue squads, Chicago SWAT, all synchronized under the Department of Homeland Security's command. Each team carried sealed orders. Each vehicle followed GPS coordinates only revealed minutes before deployment. The objective was clear: breach, seize, and dismantle. Moments later, the first encrypted message flashed across the network. All units execute. Engines roared. Lights stayed off. Doors slammed. The fog swallowed them whole. In Bridgeview, the first team hit a steel warehouse door with a breaching ram. A flashbang cracked the air, splitting the silence into chaos. Agents rushed in with rifles raised. Gunfire erupted from the rafters. Bursts of muzzle flash lit the smoke like lightning. 2 cartel gunmen went down instantly. 3 others surrendered. The entire firefight lasted less than 40 seconds. Across town in Brighton Park, resistance was heavier. Grenades rolled down stairwells, exploding near walls streaked with graffiti. A SWAT medic dragged a wounded officer to cover while others advanced, clearing rooms one by one. The sound of shell casings clattering against concrete filled the building like rain. By sunrise, every red dot on the command map had turned green. The radio calls told the story in short bursts. Echo 1 clear. Bravo 2 secure. Target 4 neutralized. When the dust settled, the results stunned even veteran agents. 4.3 tons of narcotics seized. 37 firearms recovered. 2 grenade launchers confiscated. 15 suspects captured alive. And not a single civilian casualty. It was one of the most successful multi-agency raids since the 1990s. But success came with a deeper discovery, something far more dangerous than anyone expected. Inside the first warehouse, investigators found coded ledgers filled with numbers that made no sense until decrypted. Logistics routes disguised as shipping manifests. They discovered barrels labeled cleaning solution filled with chemical precursors used to manufacture meth and fentanyl. Some containers bore Spanish markings, Producto de Mexico, and stamped beneath those labels was a name agents knew well: CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, one of the most violent and organized drug syndicates in the world. Hours later, as evidence flooded into the ICE command center, the scale of the operation grew clearer. Tables were piled with cash, phones, and hard drives still logged into encrypted messaging apps. DEA chemists began analyzing samples, discovering identical fentanyl compounds tied to seizures months earlier in Texas and Arizona. It confirmed what few had dared to say aloud. Chicago was no longer just a distribution hub. It had become a manufacturing zone. Every discovery pulled another thread. The FBI's cyber division traced digital fingerprints across a maze of laundromats, auto garages, and small trucking firms. Each business looked legitimate, filing taxes, paying rent, and advertising online. But behind those storefronts were shell companies funneling millions through offshore accounts in Panama, Guadalajara, and Mexico City. ICE forensic accountants mapped out the network. Small daily deposits, quiet Friday withdrawals, all circling back to cartel-controlled logistics hubs in Mexico. In total, $12 million in laundered funds moved through Illinois in less than 4 months. It wasn't random crime. It was strategy. The cartels had learned to weaponize America's own systems, to hide behind routine. Shipments moved along real freight routes. Trucks carrying produce or furniture also carried powder and pills, sealed behind false panels. Even rideshare networks had been infiltrated. Federal agents later revealed that dozens of illegal rideshare operators were arrested, working under fake identities, some doubling as couriers for drugs and cash. Each layer of the investigation revealed the same truth. This was not chaos, it was coordination. Officials described it as a domestic spillover event. The border had shifted. It was no longer just a line between nations. It had become invisible, woven through highways, warehouses, and human lives. The cartels weren't attacking from the outside anymore. They were operating from within. When the first reports of the raid hit the news, the nation was stunned. Video footage showed armored trucks rolling through wet Chicago streets, helicopters circling above the fog, agents in tactical gear leading suspects out in cuffs. Within days, over 550 people were detained across Illinois. Men and women from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Some had long criminal histories. Others had only recently crossed the border. Many didn't even know the full scope of the network they were working for. The arrests painted a picture of human desperation, tangled with global crime. And then came the backlash. By the following week, downtown, Chicago erupted in protest. Crowds gathered outside ICE headquarters, chanting beneath gray skies. Families, not felons, stopped the raids. Churches opened their doors to frighten families, while immigration lawyers worked around the clock to locate detainees. The city's mayor, Brandon Johnson, joined local leaders in declaring ICE-free zones across Little Village and Brighton Park, promising non-cooperation with federal enforcement. For some, it was an act of compassion. For others, it was political theater. Federal officials, however, stood their ground. "We don't decide who hides among criminals," one DHS spokesperson told reporters. "We find them before they find more victims." The word sent shockwaves through the national debate. Supporters praised it as resolve. Critics called it authoritarian. Talk shows and newspapers lit up with questions about sovereignty, security, and the thin line between policing and militarization. But inside the command center, the agents weren't watching the debates. They were still working tired, bruised, and silent, cataloging evidence through the night. The scent of chemicals clung to their clothes. On one table lay hundreds of SIM cards labeled in Spanish. Another held stacks of counterfeit IDs and Western Union transfer slips. Forensic analysts traced every phone, every file, every dollar. The deeper they went, the clearer the picture became. CJNG had built a fully operational division of its empire right inside the American Midwest. DEA chemists soon confirmed that the same fentanyl formulas found in Chicago matched those seized in Jalisco 6 months earlier. The barrels of industrial cleaner were actually precursors for methamphetamine production. In a warehouse in Cicero, agents found pill molds and candy wrappers, proof that counterfeit Adderall and oxycodone were being mass-produced to mimic prescription drugs. It was all designed to feed addiction while escaping detection. The cartel had mastered the illusion of legitimacy. What disturbed investigators most wasn't the volume of drugs, but the system that delivered them. Illegal migration had become camouflage, a human smokescreen. Migrants desperate for work were recruited as drivers and warehouse workers. They were promised quick pay, temporary visas, or safe passage. Some didn't even know they were part of a criminal network until the day of the raid. Others disappeared mid-route, replaced by new faces every week. It was a revolving door powered by fear and survival, feeding an engine of profit that never stopped running. As evidence piled higher, analysts realized they were looking at a living organism, not just a cartel, but a structure that adapted in real time. Whenever one route was cut off, another opened. Whenever one shell company dissolved, 2 more took its place. It was business evolution, accelerated by technology and greed. The morning after the raid, rain soaked the city. Steam rose from the streets as armored vehicles rolled back toward headquarters, their paint chipped, their glass cracked from the fight. The sun broke through the fog for the first time that week, casting a dull light over neighborhoods that had seen too much violence and too little peace. For once, it felt like the balance had shifted, if only slightly. But the silence that followed didn't feel like victory. It felt like intermission. 2 days later, DHS raised the national threat level to Code Amber, marking the first domestic cartel alert in U.S. history. The message was clear. The war had crossed the border. Phase 2 of Operation Midway Blitz began before Chicago could even catch its breath. The operation expanded into Indiana, Missouri, and Wisconsin. Drone surveillance units scanned highways for heat signatures hidden inside refrigerated trucks. Financial forensics teams followed every suspicious transaction. Federal documents showed 98 suspects in custody, 4.3 tons of narcotics seized, and millions in assets frozen across multiple states. But for every cell dismantled, another seemed to surface. CJ&G wasn't retreating. It was adapting. In response, federal agents began integrating intelligence from naval interdictions in the Pacific. Operations under code names like Pacific Viper and Cleanwave. The goal was clear: to choke off cartel supply lines before they reached American soil. Inside a windowless room in Washington, D.C., a senior investigator described the new reality. "The border isn't where it used to be," he said. "It's everywhere." His voice was calm, but the meaning was heavy. The battle lines had moved inland into ports, into freight yards, into cities like Chicago, Kansas City, St. Louis. Weeks after the raid, forensic teams were still unwrapping new layers of evidence. Hidden flash drives, offshore ledgers, text messages coded as grocery lists. Each discovery led to another, each lead revealing another state, another front. What started as one city operation had grown into a continental campaign, intelligence-driven, data-fed, relentless. By late 2025, the federal report on Operation Midway Blitz was finally made public. It documented over 1,000 hours of surveillance, 550 arrests, 4.3 tons of seized narcotics, 37 firearms, 2 grenade launchers, and more than $12 million traced through shell accounts. But its conclusion was what resonated most. This was not just a law enforcement success. It was a warning.